Step right up and join the most vibrant circus community in the world, circustalk.com. This is In Center Ring. I'm your host, Jonathan Lee Iverson. Guided by a poet's soul and a heroine's grace, she is a dazzling blaze of motion who has amassed an eclectic and groundbreaking body of work celebrated the world over. In Center Ring presents Susan Voyticky. I love your name because, it sounds like a brand, Voyticky. It sounds like a toy brand or something.
Well, it's a Polish origin name.
Okay.
My great-grandfather arrived from Ellis Island, and he didn't know how to read or write, and they asked him his name, and I'm sure he said something like Voyticky, and they wrote down Voyticky, and they were like, here you go.
I think Voyticky works better for circus, though.
It does. It really does sound like I should have a whole troupe.
So I'm going through your wonderful, wonderful background, which is just so artistically stimulating. Here you are venturing along to a normal life and in medicine. You're like the third person I've had on here who ruined their parents' dreams.
It's a gateway.
Having a doctor in the family. I'm so curious to know what that conversation was like when you let your family know, or as you said in the wonderful Uncle Junior project, your dad sort of found you when he was experimenting on the internet, and you were outed that way. What was the conversation though when you said, "Listen, this is what I am. I'm going to throw myself fully into being a circus artist"?
Well, it's interesting. The most telling conversation was probably when I first discovered the circus and thought it was something I might really want to do. I was home in Brooklyn and I was showing my parents, well, specifically my mother, pictures of me working in Paris in a parade, and I was doing lyra and I was above the buildings, and it's very beautiful, very simple work. But she looked at me and she said, "Are you crazy?" She essentially point blank said, "Do we need to find a psychiatrist?"
Wow.
Essentially, there was no room for discussion. It was a fully we're shutting this down now. And I think this is partially because of in the negative way that the circus was portrayed throughout her life. The circus is people who come in the night and they leave in the night, and they set up these temporary structures, and they're a little unsavory.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the combination of this sort of slightly unsavory reputation of the circus. And my mother, she was a very proud African-American woman. She had worked in genetics before being a homemaker. And I feel like for her generation, there was really only one way to get ahead in America, and that's professionally. Become a doctor, become a lawyer, have a lot of letters after your name, and then how can people possibly disrespect you? Education is the key to a level of respectability and access in America. And I feel, in a way, I was ruining two dreams for her. The idea that I would be someone important, someone, one thing my mother would say to me after I was outed was something along the lines of, how could anyone respectable want to marry you? Which, yes.
It always comes down to that eventually, right?
Exactly. They're like, not only have you ruined my dreams of being a doctor, but what about your dreams of having a family? Everything.
Oh, wow.
So, the brief conversation I had with her, and this was before I had entered into professional circus school essentially led me to not telling my parents that I was in professional circus school in London. And then, of course, later being outed by the internet.
Oh, wow. So you were trying to keep this on the low. You were in the closet.
Yes, after that conversation, I took the circus on the way DL with my parents, and
Wow.
I told them that I had gone to London for physical theater school. Yeah, they just didn't know how physical that theater was.
Right,
So.
right. So they obviously thought, okay, maybe it's a phase she has to just live through, and that's about it.
I don't think they were taking it very seriously. Or possibly my mother was taking it seriously and saying like, no, like that's when she pulled out the C word, I was like, okay,
Wow.
lady, I'm not here for this conversation.
Right.
I'm an adult and I'm going to make an adult decision, and my adult decision is not going to include discussing this repeatedly with you.
Right.
So, of course, after I had finished circus school and been outed by the internet, there was a point at which it was obvious that I was pursuing this career and this was my life. My father, the eminently practical son of immigrants who lived through the Depression, said, if you get paid, it's a job. If you don't get paid, it's a hobby. So decide what you're doing. So he never had a problem with it on a social level.
Right.
He just said it's practical. You do what you do, but either it's a job or it's a hobby. Move forward with that.
I'm wondering if, the challenge of just him being an immigrant, her being a Black woman in America, of always living as othered, and also them being a couple. I mean, they're an interracial couple, so that challenge as well.
I'll admit, my father, he was the first person in his family born in the United States. And I know he honestly felt othered most of his life. He was the son of an Irish American mother, essentially Irish, who had immigrated to America, and a Polish Slovak father whose whole family immigrated to America. So he was already the product of a mixed marriage, an Irish and Polish Slovak marriage. He told me about being teased in Queens when he grew up. I saw a picture of his grade school, and he was like the only blonde kid. I think he was in an Italian neighborhood, so they were, and with the last name Voyticky, there's no way you don't get made fun of. So, I mean, he was a real unique thinker.
Right.
And when he met my mother, he fell completely in love and almost immediately wanted to marry her. And, it definitely wasn't an easy time to do that. That's not something most people were doing. Was meeting, for him, like the most beautiful African-American woman of his life,
Right.
And for her, I mean, honestly, I just feel lucky that my grandmother liked my father. Otherwise, I don't think he stood a chance.
Yeah, I'm sure the families were kind of like, and probably not even for their own personal prejudices or not, but just because of society. And, when I hear how your mother reacted to your foray into the circus, which became your passion, it just sounds like more like, to me, not so much well, I'm sure there was a little disappointment there, a lot of disappointment, maybe, oh, I'm not going to have my doctor. But it's like, I don't want you to have to deal with that, what I guess they interpret as the vagabond life, this unpredictable existence that has no security, and also not wanting you to deal with being other. I mean, you're a woman of color, you're a woman in a society where you still have all these isms going on that are attached to you just for living. And now you're going to be a circus performer, and we're like, circus of all the arts is the outlier art all the time. No matter how advanced we do it, no matter how much everyone picks off our plate, we're the outsiders.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
I think she was proud in the end. She definitely came to see me perform a few times when I performed in New York. And I think she was proud of me both for, being single-minded to make this choice without her approval, and also for facing a fear of being judged by society, which
Mm.
I feel was really hard for her in her lifetime.
In a sense, no matter how hard you tried to fulfill the wishes of your parents, namely your mother, in pursuing medicine, it was like, it was sort of like you were dying inside and nothing was going right. The more you kept trying, or the more you were resisting the compulsion that was in you, nothing went right for you until you just gave up and said, this is what I'm going to do. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I find when you're on a path that isn't going to, when you're on the wrong path, is there a wrong path? It's hard to say, but when you're on a path that to bring it to fruition, it becomes harder and harder without any joy, right? Because the path of circus is not an easy path either.
Mm.
I'd never say that to anyone. Oh, join the circus and all your cares will go away.
Right.
No, like all the paths in life have difficulties, but there is a point at which you realize I am not having the desire to continue this difficulty. Even though the work isn't beyond my ability, I don't feel that there's joy for me in this. I don't feel that what I'm going to return to society with this path is going to keep me fulfilled and happy. And when all the paths are very difficult, if it doesn't give back to you, it's going to be really hard to follow it.
Mm. That's along the lines of our wonderful P.T. Barnum. He said one of the most, it's one of my favorite quotes of his, and he said, unless a person enters upon the vocation intended for him by nature and suited to his peculiar genius, he cannot succeed.
Mm.
And I just thought, wow, that is, it's cold, but it's true.
Absolutely.
I love the many different expressions of circus that I've been discovering more and more post-retirement. It's wonderful to see. I mean, I was looking on your website, of course, and I'm snooping around and I'm going, you're doing all of these marvelous works, but it has a story behind it.
Well, it goes back to when I was really first inspired to pursue circus. And that's when I was living in France, studying at École Jacques Lecoq. And even though when I was little, I saw circus in New York, and of course, like all the kids, I'm awed and inspired, and I love circus, and circus is great. But it didn't sort of occur to me, oh, I'm going to pursue this.
Right.
But when I was living in France, I saw so many beautiful shows that were theatrical and touching. They were sad and they were happy. They were joyous. They were just extraordinary. And that's how I was introduced to what we call new circus or cirque nouveau. And when I saw all of these things, I felt super inspired. And I was like, I'm in a theater school now, but what could I do to bring more of this circus into my life so I can bring more circus into my theater? And, little did I know when I started, because at first I think I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm in theater school. I'm going to be a physical theater artist. I'm going to be an actress doing commedia dell'arte, and I'll let the circus inspire me, and perhaps I'll be able to do more and more. And then, of course, I end up going to circus school professionally, and it slowly, the circus sort of took over the theater. And now I really love that combination of circus and theater, so that all of the work is infused with meaning. Now, that's not to say that traditional circus isn't infused with meaning. You can't say the amazing things that people do are not, honestly, incredible outright. But I love the combination, the intentional combination of theatricality, because for me, the circus is the poetry in the body. And when you add layers to that, you really get to see so much, and you're inspired on a physical level to really different heights.
I need you to please tell us about some of your wonderful work. I was watching the beautiful act that you did, which is set to one of my favorite songs, Kissing You. I was just blown away. I mean, your specialty is the lyra, as we call it over here, the lyra, but what you call it is more fancy. Please tell us, correct me.
No, lyra is wonderful. I like to use the French word, which is cerceau.
Cerceau, yes, the cerceau. We're going to use the cerceau. I like that one. And you know, a lot of people, you think circus, you're thinking of the daring and the thrill. So you're thinking of the bombast. Most people, and a lot of us aren't thinking of the lyricism. We're not thinking of the expression and the intimacy that the artists is themselves emitting out there. And you do it so wonderfully well. And it's daring and it's beautiful. And it just has, I felt the song so differently. It's one of my favorite songs. And seeing you in flight on the cerceau doing that, I was, you know, I had to watch it a few times. I mean, how do you, what is your process when you're composing a piece or you're, you know, really constructing your act or what have you? What's your process? How do you go about it? What's your outline? How do you go? What are the steps you take?
Well, my process is manyfold. Because it's circus, there is a moment where you're like, well, what are the technical skills I have that I'm able to complete safely and can be understood? And then I think, well, what's the story I'm trying to tell? And is there a way to graph that story through movement with the vocabulary I have? Sometimes I'll write down how I want the flow of the piece. Obviously, music is incredibly important, but I feel like there's inspiration everywhere. So it's really important when you make a piece to first add things to the pot and then start to take things away and edit it out. And then to check, of course, if it reads. Does it read the longing of emotion? Does it read the quiet moments? If I'm doing a piece with someone else, what's really important is the energy between us. Because if I'm telling a story, whether it's myself in a particular piece of circus equipment or the other person in the act, I really want people to relate to it. And that's one of the things that I love about, you know, the new circus. You know, it's not done in tights, even though, of course, tights are much more suitable for many of the things you do, and you show the lines beautifully. For example, in my piece Abandon, I had a really strong image of a woman, you know, wearing a beautiful dress. And I just thought, well, anyone can relate. You know, it's much easier to relate to this woman right away because, oh, she's not wearing circus clothing, you know. And of course there's that thought, well, should she really be up there? And then there's the hope that yes, she should. And then I really wanted to be able to relate to an audience through the voice. So there's live singing throughout the piece so that they know I'm a human being. I'm human like you. I'm not some superhero that you can't relate to.
Wow.
I could be any one of you.
I also got to watch Abandon, and it's one of those pieces where my toes curled up because it is flawless. It's a great tribute to your style. You know, I read somewhere where someone was saying your style is, in fact, a distinctive combination of grace and fluidity and technical prowess, and it's theatrical and you know, you have vocal expression. So you're actually up there using your voice as well while you're flying.
While I'm flying.
And all this time we thought Pink was doing something innovative. Hey, you see what I mean? Everybody's eating off her plate. There she is. She's the one who did it. You're like the Little Richard of that thing.
sure someone did it before me. I mean, this is the circus. Honestly, you look back through history and everyone has done literally almost anything. And some of them have done things you can't even do now. So.
Right. Now, it's interesting because, well, I'm a vocalist, so I'm curious. How do how are you flying and singing and all that? How do you condition yourself for that?
Well, luckily I'm a trained singer, so that's one that was like, check, okay, so I can sing, great. Then when I was in circus school, I was very lucky. I had the chance to experiment in lots of sort of smaller ways, being like, okay, well, if I sing here, what happens to my voice? Where is it going to be good? Where is it going to be less good? Like, how can I use it that it will make sense? I mean, sometimes people don't actually believe it's me singing, which is always very interesting.
Naturally, yeah.
And there's been times that I've had to been mic'd because it's difficult in certain theaters to get the amount of resonance that one would need so that you could hear. In some places, I can sing unmiked. And actually, that's almost preferred because oftentimes the mic picks up all the wind from swinging back and forth.
That's like a sound engineer's nightmare.
Pretty much. Can you just sit still? You're like, no, I can't.
That is, what's so exciting about you saying this is it really gives us a wonderful reminder how circus, in many respects, is the original experimental art form. Right? Where you can.
I love the intersectionality, right? Circus can get everything and bring it in there. Dance, theater, singing. And then the amazing daringness of a particular skill, right? That you've taken years to perfect. The funny thing is that, of course, studying, theatrical or nouveau circuit gave me such an appreciation for traditional circus. And the years and the blood and the sweat and tears people go through to produce one act. I think it's amazing, these gems, and they inspire like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And that they do this over and over again. I worked in the Universal Circus, and honestly, I'd never worked such an intense schedule. Essentially 2 shows a day and then 3 shows on the weekend. You do that 6-pack and you are just ready to lie down, but they're ready to break that tent down, pack it up, and send you to the next city and start over again. And you're just like, wow, like what amazing. It's just to see it all in action. It really gave me a huge appreciation for all the forms of circus.
Well, the beautiful thing about just your background, your training, and all of these wonderful talents that you've cultivated as an artist has also given you the privilege of being on a diverse number of stages. You mentioned Universal Circus, and of course, you spent so much time in Europe, with basically nouveau circus. So you were like sort of at the ground level of new and exciting expressions of circus. We celebrated just the other day, we celebrated with our friends, the Bindlestiff Family Circus. Yeah. You've been with them. They're wonderful, of course. I mean, they literally open their stage. They haven't opened stages to people, artists to actually experiment, create things. And many have gone on to create wonderful works that have gone on to bigger stages, thanks to having facilities like that. I'd love for you to speak to just how vital it is to have such environments for artists where you can stumble and you can grow and you can experiment and you can, really have a playground, a sandbox, if you will, before you get out to, how important is that?
Oh my goodness. It can't be stated how important it is. Like you said, because I sort of stumbled into circus in Europe. What I didn't realize is that I was in an environment that was created because of the European culture of circus. They have in France, their circus in a way is like baseball in the United States. Like every small town has a small circus school. There are 3 or 4 professional circus schools that you can go to.
Wow.
Circus is celebrated. It's not seen as an othered art. It's not, oh, well, you couldn't possibly have an opera and then a circus, and then a theater, the circus is the one that's not serious. In Europe, all of it is really supported by the culture. So it was actually quite a shock when I decided to come back to the States to do a new circus show. I was like, yes, I'm going to bring the culture of circus to America. And then I was like, oh, America's so big. And circus is really not as valued here. So it's, forget about circus, the arts in general, they're not as valued as a cultural thing to help. And in so many ways, I think this is where we're doing a disservice to our young people, let alone our mid-career artists. A lot of people will ask me, well, where are the great American circus artists? They're in Europe. They're in Canada. They're working outside of the United States because they can get value for their work. And I would love, and you're starting to see it in the States now, where there are more and more smaller circus schools. There are companies that are giving opportunities to people to study circus, to make shows. But being an artist in the United States in general is hard, and being a circus artist is really hard because you don't even just get the whammy of an artist, you get the whammy of like, well, where are the grants I can apply to as a circus artist? There's grants for dancers and choreographers and actors and theater makers, but as soon as you sort of bring circus to the forefront, it's a very interesting, I think, cultural split. People either think Cirque du Soleil or they think Ringling Brothers.
Right.
But for me, where is the intimate circus? And I love that Bindlestiff is in New York, fighting the good fight and trying to make a pathway for people to get there. And they do an amazing job, and they've been doing an amazing job. Right. But I would love to see a group like the Bindlestiff in every major city. I'd love to see small circus schools all over the country. I'd love to see a much larger pipeline. I'd love to have more companies that are American-based that tour the country, so that when the circus artists come of age and they go, well, I guess I'll have to go to Cirque or I'll have to go to Ringling Brothers, they go, no, there's a whole variety of companies in the United States where they can work and they can get paid and they can make a great living and they can make beautiful work.
I honestly believe that when we emerge from this National Day of Punishment, aka this pandemic, I truly believe that might be the reality coming out of this. I'm seeing some wonderful things with a lot of the smaller shows, and they're doing a lot of online offerings and growing their audience and really just reaching more people. We're seeing the emergence of circus media, so to speak. I'm a part of that, I guess. And it's allowing people who otherwise wouldn't really understand or know much about circus as a full living thing. That's what I always describe circus as living art. And as living art, it has all of these different expressions. And who wouldn't know it beyond the bombast or beyond Cirque du Soleil, but they're getting to know artists like yourself, and it's very important, that we really delve into just the different expressions of this craft. What's fascinating to me, you brought it up, briefly, but you didn't enter into this craft as a very young person. You thought you were too old.
Absolutely. When I think I saw the show that really inspired me was a French show called Cri de la Camille. And I was probably 21 when I saw it. And not long after, I start taking my first, circus class in France. And I thought, whew, I'm too old for this. Like, at
21,
right?
And a Black woman at that, please. Y'all don't even age. You probably look 12.
Oh, God. 21. It was very funny. I guess, in my mind, you see such young people doing circus, and they've trained for years.
Right.
And I guess I wasn't that certain of my commitment to circus.
I guess you got committed quick. But what were you an athlete, or were you already involved in theater in some kind of capacity before you made the transition into circus?
Before I made the transition into circus, I was very involved in theater and dance. So, as you mentioned, when I went to college, so just for full disclosure, I went to Stanford, and yes, I know.
The Ivy League.
No, not the Ivy League. But so I was a very serious student, and I was really trying to, when I entered, to fulfill the sort of idea that I was going to go to medical school. And as I took more and more pre-med classes, I realized I was less interested in them. And I was taking a lot of dance classes, and I was taking a lot of theater classes, to the point where you would think, oh, I was probably a dance theater minor. Like, it was pretty much, if I wasn't taking a class to fulfill sort of a medical school requirement, it was a theatrical, it was a class, it was a dance class, it was a movement class, which led, after graduating, I went to work on the Human Genome Project for Stanford. Yes. I graduated with a degree in science, technology, and society with a focus in genetics.
Now I know why your mother was upset.
Yes, you can only imagine.
Now I'm kind of mad at you. Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, it was awkward to say the least. But and I had a long time interest in genetics because my brother has Down syndrome. So for a long time, I was interested in what the causes of Down syndrome were and how is it possible to help. And that's actually what continued my interest throughout college. So even though I didn't quite fulfill all of my med school requirements, I was always thinking, well, I still am very interested in the how of things and being helpful to society. But while I was a researcher on the Human Genome Project, some of my friends were going to Paris, and they were going to go to this theater school called Jacques Lecoq, and I'd never heard of it. Of course, it's this very famous theater school. And I decided about a year after I graduated that I would like to go and just sort of see what the possibilities were in that field. And that sort of led me down the garden path, living in France, the beautiful Vie Bohème.
Right. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The circus, you don't run away with to join the circus. The circus calls to you.
Well, the circus is already in your heart. And once you start to hear that song, it gets stronger, and it's hard to resist.
Wow. Why do you think, though, it's so hard for those closest to us to understand that compulsion towards the circus and the arts in general?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that it's difficult for the people closest to us to understand that. I think one is the outright fear of the unknown, right? You don't know what lies in store in fields that you aren't involved in. I know my parents, neither one of them were involved in the arts at all. So the whole idea that you could go and make a career out of entertaining or creating something for people, it just didn't make sense to them, like from the get-go. And they think, well, and of course your parents, like, I was very lucky. My brothers were very supportive. But I think your parents, they also want to help you. And when you're doing something that's fully outside their realm, and on top of it, they don't understand, they're like, I can't help you. All I can do is wish you well. And that I think that also really irks parents.
Getting back to just, your magic making in Europe. And I can tell just by the finished product, having watched Kissing You and Abandon, having watched samples of the Garden of Eden, that, the joy of it emanates. It really emanates from you. There's something about giving birth to this piece of work you put together. And I really want people to really grasp the appreciation of putting this kind of piece together, because again, it's risky and it's entertaining. It's not just you. It's not like you're a gymnast and you just have to focus on, you have to really, and you don't just have to entertain, but you have to tell the truth, because each of these particular pieces have a thematic scheme to it that you want to honestly convey, even to the point of your wardrobe, as you said, with Abandon. You want to honestly convey to your audience. Speak on the challenges of that, and the doubts that might creep in when you even conceive of such ideas.
Well, that is the challenge, is that in so many ways, theater is an illusion. You know that person in front of you is not Hamlet. You know that, these things aren't actually happening. It's an illusion. These aren't real. These are stories that we're trying to convey a sense, right? But when you add that theatricality to the very harsh reality of circus, which is essentially to say, this person isn't doing a handstand in your mind, they're physically doing it in front of you. So when you add those two things, like the hard truth of physical circus and the illusion of theater, right? Like, it creates a magic, an alchemy of synergy. It makes me so happy when metaphors can be described and elucidated by the body and the body of work as a circus artist. In one of my pieces, Broken, right, where I'm half a ballerina and sort of half this nondescript fighter, there's the idea of one fighting oneself. However, there's the reality, and in the piece, when I'm on the floor, I fall over and over again because of the unbalance of the idea of these two halves. But when I enter into the lyra, the CSAW, there has to be a way that these sides both get along, but they still have their pull. There's still the pull of the lyricism and the fight of the fighter. But I have to be able to balance that with actually being able to do technique. Otherwise I'm going to hurt myself, which is never fun to watch. Right. And wouldn't be the point of the piece. So it is a lot to balance, the sort of illusion of theater and the hard truth of circus, which is these are tricks and I can do these tricks. But these tricks can show more than the fact that I'm amazing. Perhaps they can show that I'm on the edge of something. I'm scared to go somewhere. I want to be with someone else. You know, all of these things can be wrapped into, you know, the simple physical act of a trick. But at the end of the day, it's circus, so you have to be able to do that trick. You can't pretend.
Can't call in the stunt double. The emphasis for your work is to tell the truth. It's to tell a story, as opposed to, let's say, with something like a Ringling Brothers show, right? Or, you know, any of our wonderful, you know, whether it's Circus Vargas or what, where it's the athlete artist, meaning they're there to do a certain feat. I'm going to do the quadruple somersault on a trapeze. It's not necessarily this is a truth. And when I do this, you will see that me and my father have a great connection, you know, but it's, hey, I worked on this thing. And
no, but it's so spectacular, honestly.
Right,
I love it. And to say, yeah, let's work always toward the spectacular. There's nothing wrong with that. People need to be awed.
Yes, yes.
I think it's wonderful. I think we can all have more appreciation for one another. Honestly, in the circus, it's all hard. So why would we ever cut anyone? Oh, you're just working every day to show people how hard and amazing life is. Like,
well, you know, and that's its own. I always call that the theater of the impossible. You know, it's all theater, you know. I mean, I call that the theater of the impossible, and I love it. I mean, that's where I'm from. But listening to you, I mean, I have such an appreciation for that, you know, because I do see it now. I get it with, of course, like Cirque veers on that too, where it's we're telling a story with extraordinary bodies.
You have this very intimate weaving.
Yeah.
Right? And there's something so beautiful about the intersectionality of theater, where I think it brings you to a vulnerable place. Like sometimes going to the traditional circus, it's like being on a roller coaster, and it's just like, woo, we're gonna have a great time. Like, and it's so amazingly fun and wonderful. But some of the smaller, more intimate shows, it's a much subtler ride.
Yes. Well, you know, it's funny because it's therapeutic either way. You know, I mean, it's amazing to me. I remember because when I didn't really have a full appreciation for what we were doing, you know, because I'm like, oh, we're just selling cotton candy and popcorn. But, you know, you would have people who would come there with all sorts of experiences. And just the act of sitting in that audience and being served a pure thing, you know, just pure entertainment. It just, we want you to have a good time, and seeing people do impossible things, you know, as you said, and, you know, just seeing people do the extraordinary, push themselves, recreate themselves, conquer themselves. That in itself, it's exhilarating, you know, and if it's just that, and then to go to somebody like, you know, what you do, what you focus on is that soul surgery, you know, where, okay, we can do the impossible and give you a wonderful story in there too, or tell a certain truth in there too. It's just, it's a slight difference. And that's why I said, you know, you're like an artist athlete, and, you know, then you have athletic artists. It's magical either way you look at it.
The whole act of going to a theater, right?
Yes.
Now we can really appreciate how healing it is, how communal it is, how much our soul needs this connection, whether it's to go to the theater of the impossible or to actually go see Hamlet and have him go through these trials and tribulations. There's something that as human beings, we need to connect to one another. And that's what the theater does, whether it's in the big top or in a small, intimate black box, even on the street. I miss all of it.
What's next for you?
Well, I'm training again and getting back in shape so that I can do a virtual circus show with Carolyn Kalushin Company, which is called Circus and Dance For All. And that's going to be on November 20th and 21st, and you can get tickets online.
Now, we were talking earlier, and you did mention something about your own company.
Yes, my company, Loki Circus Theater. I'm the artistic director.
Okay.
We've done some workshops and happenings over the years, and before the pandemic, we were planning on having a workshop version of the show Colored Girls, which is from the choreo poem play. Well, it's inspired by the choreo poem play for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is not enough. And I hope eventually to have a full-length show with 7 women of color performing circus and really sharing things about their life.
So how happy are you on a scale to 1 to 20? How happy are you that you made that decision, that you had the courage to make that decision?
Yeah, I can't imagine my life had I not joined the circus. I feel as a healer and an artist and a teacher, this is the best way for me to give back to my community and being who I really am. And there's kind of nothing better.
I like that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, there's nothing better than Susan Voyticky.
And Jonathan Lee Iverson.
Oh, you're not going to take my job.
The Black experience in circuses go back hundreds of years, and we do it with our own style. The circus has been a microcosm of the outside world. Many of the same prejudices that you see in the outside world are present in the circus.
So it's moving past the vision or the limited vision that the society has for you and stepping into the talent and skill that you know you have to go forward as a performer.
The circus is a vast international community, and there's only one place to connect for jobs, events, the latest news, and so much more. circustalk.com. Join today.